Good afternoon and welcome to The Road to Recovery, The Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every Friday, and Friday it is, so it's good to be here. It's a beautiful day. It's getting a little bit warmer, but for those of you who think the earth is about to burn, I think you need to look over the last 2.5 months and look at the average temperatures, which would have been the coldest in 20 years, my friends, and maybe just think that all the things that you were told are not always correct. If you bother to actually do the research, check the facts, go to institutes like the Smithsonian, as I do, an hour every night, and check out what's really going on, you just might be surprised by the truth. And no point in me telling you about it because you won't believe me. Go and do the research for yourself. Find out what's really going on. All it takes is a little bit of intelligence. If it doesn't sound right, chances are it's probably not. And what we do, what we think, the way we behave has a direct reflection, not just on you, not just on today, not just on society, but for decades to come, your children. If you are an idiot, you act like an idiot, your children watch you and that's what they will become. If you are kind, thoughtful, generous, disciplined, respectful of the law, that's exactly what they become. Now, I was watching this woman today holding on to a child. He must have been maybe 8, and she's trying to push away into busy ongoing traffic in the main street in Marston, and I'm thinking, you lady are the problem. 20 feet north of her, a crossing. 20 feet south of her, a crossing. But no. People don't use crossings anymore, and I've got to ask you why. Why don't you use them? They're there for your personal protection, to give you right of way and to stop motorists from getting annoyed and having to swerve to avoid you and not smack you over and put you in hospital. Please, for the love of God, use them. Simple little things like that, the discipline that we teach our children. We make our children good. We also make our children bad. And if you don't like the way society is, I guess you just got to realise that it's your fault and that you can change it. A lot of us feel powerless, and when it comes to mental health, we think, what can I do? I'm not a psychiatrist, I can't change things. Have a cup of tea and listen to someone who is suffering, and that will make a difference. It might only be small at first because it takes a while for people to trust you. It really does, and they'll always remember that one bad thing you do, and boy, will they remind you of it. But bit by bit, if people learn that you're a decent person and you genuinely do care, they'll feel better about themselves, and that's what it's all about. There's no point in saying, oh, look, we've got 10,000 visits for young people to psychiatrists if they're not feeling so well. I put it to you that preventative measures are 10 times cheaper and 10 times better. Don't wait until someone is so sick that they need bailing out. If you see someone who's suffering in any way, just take the time out to do something kind and thoughtful. Find out when their birthday is. Just surreptitiously, just rather quietly, find out when and send them a birthday card. Or a Christmas card if you can't be bothered finding out. Just a Christmas card. I've started doing it. I've started sending Christmas cards to my friends because I'm one of those rotten sort of people who fall out of touch with folks. It's one of my weaknesses, one of my many weaknesses. And I thought, well, I do care about these people, but I just don't say it. So that little act of kindness, it's amazing how people responded. They said, wow, I really didn't expect to get a Christmas card from you, but there it was. And they remember those sort of things because they think someone actually cares. And that makes an enormous amount of difference, and no amount of money can replace that. I mean, we are stuck in this boat together, so we can either choose to fight and hate and ignore and just be self-serving a-holes, or we can choose to actually do something with our lives and make a difference and give those children someone to look up to and say, hey, now, that's how I ought to behave. That's how I want to be. Instead of just some greedy, grabbing, selfish idiot. Because honestly, I despair when I see what's happening to our society. I keep finding myself saying, oh, I'm going to be glad to be gone. What has it become? And I think the pendulum has gone from one side to the other. We've gone from an overly disciplined, vicious, nasty, violent society to a point where we've spoiled everyone so rotten that all they think about is, don't miss out, you're missing out. And we give children complexes and make them feel worthless if they are not success stories. We set our children up to fail right from daycare, kindergarten, and we know through things like the Dunedin study exactly how to identify and fix these problems early. But the fact of the matter is we don't. And those people who are maladjusted are the criminals at the end of the day. They are the ones who strike back against society because they feel excluded, and they have been. Or, unfortunately, sometimes they feel valueless and excluded and commit suicide. And over 650 people did in the last year, and almost every single one of them was suffering from extreme mental illness. They felt trapped and that there was no escape. Now, that's the ones that actually died. We're not talking about those that contemplated it, those that tried and failed. So, we are talking about an absolutely massive problem in this country that desperately needs sorting out. And it is beginning, but boy, we have to put our shoulders to the wheel now and really fix this up, because these are our brothers and sisters that are dying. This is our family, and we owe it to them to try harder and not to fail them. It really is that simple. Right, well, I know that's a bit of a downer, and I didn't mean to bring you down, but, we do have to address these things, and if we don't, nobody will. That's the truth of the matter. So, I really hope that you folks take it on board and do something, especially with the young ones, and give them some good direction. I'd just like to say hi to everybody, including those up in the Hawke's Bay. I hear you had a bit of an earthquake a little while back there. I originally was brought up in Wellington, and yeah, I know what it's like, my friends. It scares the bejazzers out of you. It's pretty scary thing. So my thoughts are with you. Hope everything's cool and you don't get any more of them. I think it was about a 5.4, which is, it's quite a shake. So yeah, I know, scary stuff. It's nice to have you all on board. I appreciate you coming on board. I hope to be up that way soon and enjoy some of that beautiful weather you folks have. She's a spectacular part of the country and nearly as good as the Wairarapa. It's a beautiful place down here, and if you get the chance, come down, get out to places like Castle Point and Mount Holsworth. They are spectacular, very, very much worth seeing, and not on the tourist trails very much at all, weirdly enough. I'd also like to say special thanks to everyone, all of our sponsors who have sponsored us. Arrow Radio is a local radio station, as you probably know, and it's a not-for-profit organisation run by Veronica and Michael, who do a great, great job. They really make a hell of an effort. They are so thoroughly professional and kind. They are trying to make a better society, and they are some of the real movers and shakers of movements like ours that try to help the community, us, the people, not someone overseas who we've never seen and we don't know. It's you and me in it together. So thank you very much, Michael and Veronica. To Wairarapa TV, thanks for doing all this for us, for helping us spread the good word and get out there in front of the Goggle Box. I'm sure people appreciate it. I've had a few people who I didn't expect to be in any way interested in my show make some good comments about it, and it's always really nice to get the odd compliment. It's very flattering, and I really appreciate it, and I feel like, well, maybe what I'm doing is worthwhile. I certainly hope so. Right, we're going to crack on with today's story before we run out of time. This is a funny old story. It's about my time in Spain in June. I travelled the world quite extensively. I spent about just over 7 years overseas in all kinds of places, and one of them was Spain. And this is the running of the bulls. Every long hot June in Pamplona, Spain, they indulge in an age-old tradition. The town triples in size before the locals let the bulls loose on the crowd. In an organised kind of mayhem, they block off a route through the medieval part of town. At the bottom of the hill, they release the bulls from a huge set of wood and steel gates. This starts at dawn, and anyone mad enough to choose to run the course must run for their lives along the course to the arena. The tourist shops there are full of postcards with pictures of terrified locals and tourists alike, dodging rampant angry bulls. You can't help but laugh at their dilemma, yet a twinge of trepidation creeps in, knowing that it will be me tomorrow. We send a few cards to friends with funny comments and a bit of false bravado. We had made it to the first day from St. Sebastian, where the 5 of us in a combi van had been partying hard, watching reruns of Catch-22 and old bullfights where matadors get gored by bulls, drinking the local sangria all day and dancing all night. Pamplona for 1 week would be party central. Celebrations bordered on the religious, but of the 5 of us, only myself and Seedy were up for the ultimate challenge, the bull run itself. The others were happy to eat, drink and party all night. We had found a large river frontage where we set up camp, and other combi vans were drawn like moth to flame until it resembled a village. Seedy and I had decided to check out tomorrow's route, so we had an idea of what we were in for. After checking out the tourist shops, we decided to walk the route we would run the next day. It was very hot, the sun belting off the high stone walls and cobblestone streets. The roads were narrow and afforded little to no protection from oncoming bulls. Getting some distance on them would be crucial to making it to the arena in one piece. About halfway along our walk, in a pretty run-down, dodgy-looking part of town, a tubby guy with a big, broad smile caught my eye as he happily whispered, "Hashish," in my ear. What was that I required with a smile? And he produced what looked like a large ball of horse shit. "What do you want for that?" I inquired suspiciously. It worked out at about 40 British pounds. It's about $80. So I took a smaller lump for 10 quid. The chubby Moroccan chap seemed pleased and promised to catch up tomorrow. "We may be as high as kites by then," I mused to Seedy. After stocking up on booze in the form of sangria and cheap wine, we headed back to Combi Village, which was walking distance to a bar where we set up headquarters for drinking and planning. After spending all afternoon eating and getting liquored, we headed back to camp and lit up a fire. Remembering my dubious purchase of hash in my pocket, I asked Seedy and the others if they wanted to go. Pretty soon we were all stoned as crows, staring at the fire and giggling like fools. Not only was this shit real, it was as potent as could be. There was plenty to go around and still more for tomorrow. We turned in before midnight, determined to get up before dawn and head into town for the run. We slept fitfully, our thoughts filled with eagerness for the bull run to begin, and Seedy woke me whilst it was still dark. I climbed into the passenger seat of the combi and rolled up a massive spliff. Seedy got behind the wheel and refused my eager offers, so I ended up massively stoned by the time I got to town. We parked up near the start of the run and hurried down to the start, reassuring each other and giggling like kids. Once down on the start, by the huge set of gates, we donned red neckerchiefs, as was the local custom, to show bravado in the face of fear. A 3-minute alarm bell rang out amongst what was by now a huge crowd, and in the panic many of the foreigners started running up the hill from the gates, to a huge amount of derision from the locals and those foolish enough to stay. The locals whipped up into a fervour of dancing and shouting, waving rolled-up newspapers in the air, and before too long the gates were opened and the bulls released into the waiting crowd. The locals set upon the bulls, whacking them on the shoulders with the rolled-up newspapers, which cranked the bulls up no end. Upon seeing this, I tore off up the hill so fast my feet barely touched the ground. The crowd was not far behind, leaving the confused and angry bulls to follow slowly as the steep slope slowed them down. Now I understood how we would stay ahead. I relaxed to a jog and took in the scenery. All along the road, people were crammed onto first-floor balconies overhanging the narrow streets. They shouted and cheered at the top of their voices, waving and throwing stuff, and I waved like a football player who had just scored a goal. After a short while, Seedy caught up with me. "Better get a move on, they're catching up," he shouted over the din. We both picked up the pace and looked back to see the bulls had reached the top of the hill and the crowd beginning to part around them. Already bodies were beginning to fly or dart away from the angry beasts as they began to pick up speed. Once on the flat, the bulls were outpacing the runners and began to reel us in. With our progress impeded by the crowd in front, it soon became obvious we would be caught, and a palpable sense of fear swept through the crowd with lots of shoving and shouting. A few more 100 metres and the bulls were upon us. We looked back to see bodies flying, and I made a dive into a 150mm doorway entrance, whilst Seedy dived into the gutter, covering his head. That same look of terror from the postcards painted on our faces as bodies flew in all directions and the bulls rumbled through. After a few seconds, the panic moved forward, and realising we were in one piece, we rejoined the melee from the rear, shouting as more bodies got poked and trampled on. We followed the mayhem up to the arena at the end of the course, broke off and entered the arena. Inside, a crowd gathered in the centre as the bulls were corralled outside, then allowed to enter one at a time. The crowd in the middle formed up in a V shape towards the oncoming bull, which would either shy away or go ploughing straight in. When the bull ploughed straight in, the crowd would scatter in all directions, people zigzagging and running in tight circles to keep clear of the bull's nasty horns. As the crowd got more drunk, some took to sitting at the front of the V, and one or two took a horrible beating. The ambulance outside did a roaring trade all day. I was far too stoned to join the mayhem, and was quite content to drink, shout, and be entertained by the crazy crowd down on the sand. No television could do justice to the fun we were having, watching the bulls wreak a little revenge on the crowd, so we watched until the proceedings ended, then wandered back to the centre of town for more partying. The streets were overflowing with bands playing traditional music and people dancing, drinking and shouting. At the centre of the throng was a place called the Muscle Bar, with a square full of people and a statue where people started climbing and doing dives off it into the crowd. People below were catching them as best they could, but many were falling through and getting smashed up on the cobblestones below. They would then be dragged off to the waiting ambulance. All 5 of us had met up by now, so we tried to catch as many drunken fools as we could until our arms became too sore and we left them to the inevitable fate of their stupidity. As the night of smoking, drinking and dancing wore on, it all became a bit of a blur, but somehow someone managed to drive us back to Combi Village, where we lit a huge fire and shared the rest of my premium Moroccan horseshit. The day of the first running of the bulls was over for us, but we vowed to stay on and watch some more, along with one of the bullfights scheduled for that week. The bullfight. The day after our first running of the bulls, we rose quite late and decided to catch an afternoon of real bullfighting. It was another scorching hot day, so we took plenty of water and drove the combi to town. People were still partying hard in the streets, with some unconscious bodies lying about on park benches. I had very mixed feelings on the way up the hill. On the one hand, I was going to watch some fine bulls being slaughtered by a matador and his cohorts. It would happen with or without me. On the other hand, to have an informed opinion on this, was it not better to witness this thing? To be absolutely fair, I had to go, for fear I miss an essential part of the whole cruelty debate. So it didn't bode well. When entering the complex, we walked past badly scarred whores belonging to the horseman whose job it is to sever the shoulder muscles of the bull with a spear. The armour the horses wear hardly seems adequate, and I feel for the poor creatures. Before the picador comes the toreador, usually are the matadors, who stick small spears into the bull's shoulders with great leaps over the horns, showing great agility and courage. Then the picador on horseback, with an armoured leg guard and horse for protection, he maims the bull's upper shoulders permanently. This stops the bull from being able to turn too sharply and catch the matador off guard. If he does too thorough a job, the crowd boo and jeer him, pelting him with oranges, drink cups, and often bottles are thrown. Thirdly and finally comes the matador with his red cape and single rapier with which he sticks the bull down the neckline and through its heart. The matador first carries out a series of passing sweeps of the bull by encouraging the bull to charge at the cape. With each sweep in the blazing heat, the bull gets slower and more tired until run to a complete standstill so the fatal blow can be delivered. A terrible ending in the ring for the bull, if all goes to script. But that is not what the crowd hope for. They chant for Toro, the bull, to get the better of the matador, goring or even killing him in the ring. The blood the crowd truly lust for is that of the matador, and that afternoon we saw just that. In the third match of the day, a particularly large black bull was set to by the ranks, yet seemed to hold up well against the early spears. The young matador stood proudly centre ring, unfurling his cape and doing some passes which became closer and closer. Still the bull showed great stamina and kept charging relentlessly. The crowd grew restless, even booing the poor matador. A chant of Toro, Toro now started up, and still the matador performed for a little longer, then made up his mind, revealing the rapier to deliver the final blow. But he was wrong, and the bull still too fresh. As he came forward with swords, the bull charged again. The rapier glanced off his shoulder and he hooked the matador cleanly in the guts, lifting him off the ground. The crowd as one leapt to their feet, shouting "Toro! Toro!" at the top of their voices as the matador staggers to the ground. Visibly shaken, he regains his composure and tries to deliver the blow a second time. Once again he misses, and the bull picks him up and smashes him into the ground, almost running him through with a horn. The crowd is whipped up into a frenzy as they bay for the blood of the matador. Badly damaged, the matador staggers to his feet to try a third time, and to all our dismay, the bull is killed on the third lunge of the injured matador. The magic has suddenly ended, yet it is unlikely the matador will ever fight again after his failure at this fight. The poor dead bull is dragged out of the arena to claps and cheers for his bravery, and I realise another dimension of bullfighting that was not previously appreciated. I felt sick but elated together at the conclusion of that epic match. I could appreciate the Spaniards' love for such an exhilarating sport, but at the same time the death of these fine animals was hard to take. Not having those hundreds of years of tradition behind me lended an unbiased opinion, but robbed a little of the appreciation. The skill and bravery of all involved is beyond question, and the cruelty is palpable. It was a step back in time that I had never experienced before and never will again. I imagine little has changed through the centuries, the pomp and pageantry of the costumes or the bravery of their foe. Such old traditions cannot be cast off lightly by its people, as tradition blends into identity. At the end of the day, we went back to the bar near Combi Village to get a feed, get drunk and talk over the day's bullfighting. Opinions varied greatly as to the merits of the sport, but the skill and bravery required were undoubted. I believe doing the bull run and watching some bullfighting live added some perspective that others who had not seemed very aloof. To grow up as a local and be awash with the culture is another perspective again. There is no middle ground in this, such as the passion and joy for the event itself. It is impossible not to get caught up in it all. Some of the love of the moment rubs off on you. More intoxicating than liquor or hash, it takes a place in the heart. I look back on those hot days of Spanish summer wistfully. Time and distance turns the perspective to the finest and most memorable pieces. The feelings of adulation and terror mingle with such humour, fun and dancing. Life well lived with passion for the moment, and one bite lasts a lifetime. That's all she wrote for this week, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you next week. Bye for now. Thank you. See ya.